What's going on, y'all? It's JD Piquel with On 3. This is the Hard Count. We are officially getting the party started in Nashville. What better way to get the party started than giving you our way too early college football playoff predictions? Welcome into the Hard Count on 3. We got a lot of great stuff lined up for you, from analysis to predictions to talk with people in this sport that know the game and love the game. We're going to keep it 100 with you on this channel, and we're going to talk about the game that you love, that I love, that we love and get to enjoy as people of college football. Let's get into it. Right now, it's talking season. What is talking season? Talking season is the time that you spend between games being played and recruiting and things of that nature. This is the time we get to just talk this game to death. And there's no other better way to get this thing started off with the party with here on the Hard Count than talking about college football playoff predictions. It's way too early. I know it. You know it. It's way too early. It may not shake out exactly as we draw it up right now. But for the sake of talking season, for the sake of what you love and I love, we're going to give you our college football playoff predictions. So at number 1, it should be no surprise to you, but the Alabama Crimson Tide are primed to go absolutely bonkers this coming year. If Nick Saban ever needed any motivation, he has all of it in the 2022 season in this group, and he's star-studded across the board in terms of this roster. You got Bryce Young having a Heisman caliber season a year ago. You got Will Anderson, who also had a Heisman caliber season a year ago, just didn't take the award home. I challenge you, look at this team and show me the weakness. I mean, legitimately, every single spot on this team that they were weak a year ago, they have now shored up. You got Eli Ricks playing corner opposite, probably going to be Kool-Aid McKinstry, so they're good in the secondary. You go and get Jermaine Burton to try and shore up the guys you lost in the draft with Jamison Williams and John Mechie. They're going to be really solid. Oh, and by the way, you added what was probably the best player in the ACC from a year ago in Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech. He's toting the rock for you. So there's really no weakness that I'm seeing right off the bat with Alabama. So as with any college football playoff contender, you still have to run the table during the regular season to get to the big dance. With Alabama being in the SEC, it's easier said than done. So let's take a look at some potential slip-up spots for the Crimson Tide if they were to, for whatever reason, have a slip-up in the regular season. They have Arkansas in Fayetteville, October 1. Then they have Tennessee the third Saturday in October, October 15th. These are two games that I'm watching really closely, teams that are obviously in conference. And Arkansas, a team that plays a tough brand of football, they're smash mouth. They could shorten the game and slow it down and keep it out of Bryce Young's hands. We're not going to pick that game. That's not what we're doing here today. But if there were to be two games to watch really closely, it's at Arkansas and at Tennessee. Tennessee obviously being a rivalry game. Hendon Hooker has all the hype in the world coming into this year. So we're going to keep an eye on those two games moving forward. But all things considered, when you sit down at the end of the day and you talk about this Alabama team, in terms of a program that didn't need any motivation but still has it, Alabama's hungry, and that's a dangerous, dangerous thing for everyone else in the world of college football. Next, at the number 2 spot, I'm looking at Ohio State. They may very well be undefeated. I just think Alabama might be undefeated as well. The offense for Ohio State has never been the question. It's never been a concern. Obviously, they lose Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson to the draft, but they got Jackson Smith and Jigba. They got Marvin Harrison Jr. And oh, by the way, you have arguably the best quarterback in the country in C.J. Stroud. And so for me, the question lies with the defense, because that was the Achilles heel at times a season ago for Ohio State. Now they bring in Jim Knowles to be the new man at the defensive coordinator spot. They bring in some transfers with him, most notably Tanner McAllister from Oklahoma State, going to help the secondary. If the defense can be even 15 to 20% better than they were a year ago, Ohio State's going to be in the playoff. That's just a matter of fact. Now at the 3 spot, I got Oklahoma. And if you look at the Big 12 right now, it's a really fuzzy, messy picture because there's a ton of transition going on within a lot of programs. Look at Texas. We don't know what Quinn Ewers is going to be. I mean, there's a lot of stars next to his name coming out of high school, and there's a lot of talk about him coming from Columbus, coming to Austin. But he hasn't really taken a ton of meaningful snaps in the game. Look at Baylor. They lost a lot of production on offense and defense. TCU, new head coach. So there's a lot of things going on within the Big 12 to where Oklahoma has potentially some of the most continuity on the offensive side of the football, and that's going to bode really well for them. Dylan Gabriel has played under Jeff Lebby before at UCF. Jeff Lebby obviously coming from Ole Miss to be the offensive coordinator in Norman. And so for those two to be on the same page, that's giving them a head start on everybody else within that conference. So if they can have an edge under Brent Venables on defense, I think the offense could get humming here pretty quickly. At number 4, I'm talking about Clemson. And I know we're going to get some kickback here. I know there's going to be people that are up in arms about this, but just hear me out for a hot second. Clemson may have the best front 7 in the country. They had a down year a season ago and they won 10 games. DJ Uiagalelei is going to start game 1. They need better from him. Now you have a 5-star in the wings in Cade Klubnik, who I'm sure is just itching to jump in when he gets tagged. However, we saw a year ago with Georgia, if you are special on defense, now special is a very big word. Special is not something you just throw around in conversation. But if they can be special on defense as much as I believe they can be, DJ Uiagalelei just has to get the ball to playmakers and hand the ball off. He doesn't have to take the game by the throat. Now they have to go to Notre Dame. They get NC State and Miami at home. They also have Wake Forest at Wake Forest early in the year. But in terms of how this team is built, I think the defensive side of the football is going to do a lot for Clemson's chances. We've seen it time and time again. This game is won in the trenches, and Clemson is very good in the trenches. The ACC is also super workable. They're not going to get a lot of love in terms of their non-conference schedule is Clemson, but the ACC is very much a workable conference, that they can come out of that, be the champion. Even if they're a one-loss team, I still think it's a conversation on Selection Day in terms of if they get in or not. So those are our 4. We got Bama at 1, Ohio State at 2, Oklahoma at 3, Clemson at 4. But who's left out? Because there's one name that I didn't say that I'm sure you're very upset about. In fact, they're over my left shoulder. The Georgia Bulldogs, defending national champions, and you have a right to be upset. My biggest thing is it's hard to have 2 teams out of the same conference make it. Obviously, it's happened twice, but 2 in a matter of I don't know how many years, that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. It's very difficult to make the college football playoff if you don't win your conference. And for Georgia, they only bring back 3 starters on defense. I'm not questioning their defense. I'm just saying that might take a second and a half to kind of get revved up and get cohesive on. Even if it doesn't, to be as good as you were on that side of the ball a year ago is a really tall order. And so if they're not as good as they were a year ago on that side of the football, you're asking more from Stetson Bennett. And I think we kind of know what we have in Stetson Bennett, which is fine. It's no knock on Stetson Bennett. It's just when the game is on the line, when the chips are down, and you're asking Stetson Bennett to win the football game for you, I have a harder time believing he's going to come through every single time. He might come through sometimes, but if they have 2 losses, they're not making the college football playoff. I think they play in Atlanta for the SEC title. I'm not doubting that. But do they get there with no losses? I don't think so. I also don't think they beat Bama in Atlanta, for the record. So I have Georgia as one of my first teams out. I also have Baylor. Similar logic to what Oklahoma's doing. The Big 12 is asking for a team to be dominant. Baylor, regardless of what they lost production-wise on offense and defense, they still returned the trenches. Offensive and defensive line, majority of those big-time pieces come back on both sides of that line. And so for that reason, I think Baylor's going to be able to kind of get it figured out earlier. Dave Aranda is a phenomenon in college football right now. He is a solar flare of a rising star in the sport. So he's going to get that defense figured out. I don't think they end up beating Oklahoma. I think that Baylor finishes with 2 or 3 losses, but they still play for the conference and end up being one of the first 2 out, which is a big, big W for everybody in Waco. So our 4 playoff teams, Bama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Clemson. Georgia and Baylor just outside looking in. But obviously, it's talking season. A lot's going to happen. They're still going to roll the ball out and play the games. And I can't wait for it. We're going to be right here with you, tracking every single Saturday. This is your new home for everything that you know and that you love about college football. It happens here on a nearly daily basis. We're going to keep the party rolling. We will see y'all next time.